When you need to focus on building, do you want to get bogged down by your database? MongoDB is an intuitive, flexible document database that lets you get to building. MongoDB's document model is a natural way to represent data so you can focus on what matters. MongoDB Atlas is the best way to use MongoDB. It's a global cloud database service that gives you all of the developer productivity of MongoDB, plus the added simplicity of a fully managed database service. You can get started free with MongoDB Atlas at mongodb.com/atlas. Hi, this is Scott Hanselman. This is another episode of Hansel Minutes, and today I'm talking with Hugh Bailey. He's the author and maintainer of OBS Studio and the OBS Project. How are you?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm enjoying my pandemic, as pandemics go. It's a good one, I would guess. We are safe. Hopefully your folks are safe as well.
Yeah, I'm just, staying at home. I never really go outside anyway, so.
A lot of people are saying, yeah, I guess my lifestyle is called pandemic.
Yeah, pretty much. I just never really went outside that much, so it didn't really change much for me.
Well, hopefully that'll work out well. So you are the original author and maintainer of Open Broadcaster Software, the OBS Project, now OBS Studio. Is it true, the rumor or the legend is that you just wanted something that you could stream a game with? Like, was it like
Starcraft.
You just wanted I have Starcraft 2, I want to stream Starcraft 2. I guess before I play Starcraft, I will write a complete cross-platform streaming and recording platform.
Well, it wasn't cross-platform at first. The first version was just Windows only, and it was it was pretty terrible, but it worked pretty well despite being written pretty terribly. I didn't know what I was doing, so I was just kind of winging it. I suppose even to this day I'm still winging it sometimes, but back then I was really winging it and just wanted to do everything myself. I wanted to figure out everything myself. I wanted to do all the color conversions myself and do all the encoding myself and just figure everything out because it was fun. And, I've always loved to write my own tools. I was just that sort of programmer who loved to write his own stuff.
Mm-hmm. It does feel like this is just kind of me making, I'm anthropomorphizing the software. It feels like it's a series of Lego pieces. Like it feels like it was written with this can be a plugin and this can be an add-on and this can be a plugin. Like you were playing with Legos where the Legos were codecs.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I designed at least this version to be modular to where you can just install everything's plugin based. So everything's modular, and you can install additional plugins and get plugins from our forums and, extend the program and things like that.
Mm-hmm. So let's up level and explain to folks who don't know what OBS is, right? This is a streaming and recording program. It's kind of a complete television studio on your computer.
Yeah, pretty much. It's I suppose the most accurate way is to say a desktop. It's not even just desktop. People use it to capture more than desktop, but it's a capturing, recording, streaming program, and it's it's live capturing, recording, streaming programs, and people use it for pretty much anything when it comes to needing to capture even say your webcam or your desktop or a video game. It was primarily written for video games because I wanted to stream video games, but it ended up being so much more, and I had to keep adding to it and based upon user feedback, because people wanted more and more, and the program just kind of blew up from there.
Yeah. One of the things that I think is the most powerful that I think people are really starting to come to terms with is its concept of scene composition. This is the thing. It's a real-time source device capture. It's a recording studio. It's a broadcasting studio. But it's so thoughtful in the way that it allows you to compose scenes. And when I explain it to people, you need to make a scene and you need to compose that scene, that's the first big concept that they don't get. I'll introduce it to someone and they'll go, oh, it's Camtasia. It's like, well, no, it's not really. Oh, what is it? It's just a router? Well, no. Let's talk about your scene. Once we get them past that mental block of composing a scene, you kind of see them click in and they go, oh my goodness, I could do this, I could do this, I could do that.
Yeah, it's I didn't really know what I was doing at the time, so I just designed it, based upon my best guess of like how I would make a composition program if I were to do something like this. And so I came up with the scene where it was like based upon scenes and sources. You'd have like a bunch of sources and you'd put them into a scene, and then you could create another scene, and then you could switch between those scenes, and it would like fade between those scenes. And it's a pretty simple concept, and one that I feel like most people understand pretty clearly once it clicks. It's like, oh, yeah, that's pretty simple.
Yeah, exactly. Once it clicks, it's like, wait a second, and then I can have collections of scenes, and then you're off and running. And the even now, as I've been using it for quite a while, I am still discovering and thinking about new sources. And I think that's one of the other exciting things about OBS is that, you install it, you put your webcam up there, you put maybe a chyron or a little thing at the bottom that says your name. And then, if MSNBC ever calls you, you're ready to go because you're like, yeah, I'm ready to put my name at the bottom. Like, that's cool. And then recently I discovered this thing called OBS.Ninja. Have you played with that?
I have not played with it, but I've heard of it. I don't actually remember what it's all about.
Well, so one of the things that I've been doing and other people in my community have been doing are running our conferences on OBS now, right? With COVID, OBS is having a moment, and then we'll talk about that. And what OBS.Ninja does is it basically is a website you go to. It uses JavaScript and various JavaScript APIs to capture your video and your audio. And then we just go into OBS and add a browser source. And this allows me to have someone give me their video, give me their audio, give me their shared desktop, and they don't have to install anything. It's just a lovely open source add-on that means no one has to Skype in or Teams in or Zoom in. They just use a browser source, which is amazing.
Wow. Yeah, that is amazing. Yeah, it's just like I was telling you, I made it modular, and people started creating all these cool add-ons and things like that. And I'm really proud of like everything that the community has made. Just so many amazing people. I feel like the thing I'm most proud of isn't really so much the software, but the community that's built around it. It's just absolutely wonderful community.
What is something that someone made for OBS that surprised you and you were like, oh, I did not see that coming?
That's a good question.
What's an add-in or a plugin that is like technologically epic and you're like, oh, I should have thought about that. That's a genius plugin idea.
Well, I'm not sure if I've ever like thought of it like any particular plugin as like, oh, that's a genius plugin idea. I wish I had thought of that. But I have seen some crazy plugins that have surprised me, like facial recognition plugins, and like face mask plugins where you would have like stuff pop up over your face and things like that. And people have done just so many amazing things with the program that it just blows my mind. And people use it for so many things that I just never really expect like that. And it's like the example you were talking about. That's kind of like an example that sort of blows my mind. It's amazing. And that I just go back to what I was saying about the community. The community is just an absolutely wonderful community, and they've just made it into something greater than the sum of its whole. It's really wonderful.
Is that because of that original plan of modularity when you started, when you then have other contributors get involved? Is there a manifesto or this we believe as the team, the OBS project says, okay, we're going to do a new feature. Let's make sure that this is extensible.
No, I wouldn't necessarily say that we have like any sort of manifesto or anything. To answer your first question about like whether I intended for this stuff to happen with like it being modular. I mean, to some extent, yeah. I don't think I had some of these ideas in mind, like the examples that you're stating. But in general, I made it open source to allow this sort of stuff. And that was, I think, the biggest blessing, just being open source and having so many wonderful people come into the program and contribute so many wonderful things like that. But for your second question about whether we have like a manifesto or anything, no, I really don't ever have. I gotta be honest with you. I'm kind of winging it sometimes. I'm just like, each patch I'll be like, okay, what do we work on next? And it's just like complete blank slate sometimes. It can be kind of hard because I don't really, it's kind of hard for me to be able to like have this long-term plan sometimes because things are constantly changing. Like the whole COVID situation, it forced me to write like a virtual camera plugin, or at least integrate the existing virtual camera plugin into the program. And so I basically had to stop what I was thinking about or going to do, and I just decided to write that. So that'll be something in the next version 26. But yeah, we don't really have any sort of manifesto. It's just like we're just kind of operating at the edge of our seats here. It's kind of funny.
Well, to your credit, though, I think there is an implied manifesto, and it is one of stability. I have been running it for months. I couldn't tell you the last time I restarted it, and that's one of the things that I think is worth calling out to your credit and the team's credit. I'm curious. There doesn't appear to be any major leaks. You're pushing 30 frames a second on my computer for the last several weeks without any trouble, without any hiccups. It is to its credit that it is such a stable thing. That must not be luck.
Well, I mean, for the stability, I'm pretty anal about having good code. You know, there would be people who would argue with you on that point because there are some people who...
I'm sure that there are things you can do that would hurt it, but for the most part, it is well thought of for its stability, and I have found it to be rock solid.
Well, thank you. I do... the program is extremely multi-threaded internally, and it was very challenging to get it to this point. There's been so many times I can't even begin to tell you where we've had thread locks and things like that, just hard locks, and it's just, you have to be really, really careful with it. And I'm very, very anal and very selective about the code that goes into the project. If anybody's making like this big pull request, I'll just be like sweating bullets, over it. And, it just makes me nervous every single time because, it's like, so eventually, I'm going to miss something and something's going to break. That's happens quite frequently. And also we don't have automated testing. Well, we just added automated testing, just minor automated testing, but for that entire duration that you're talking about, we haven't had automated testing. So it's been, every time we make a release, it's been a very nerve-wracking experience because we have to constantly release a couple hot fixes inevitably after that. We did eventually, start having like a beta process just to supplement it. But it's kind of inevitable when you don't have automated testing. But
I guess the fear of regressions would be a challenging one.
Yeah. Just you just got to be super paranoid about it, I guess.
Is there internally? I assume that there's a pipeline of sorts that you run filters and all of the different things. There's an internal compositor, but you want to keep the work that you're doing internally down to as few milliseconds as possible. And my team and I, as we also integrate this ourselves internally at Microsoft with Microsoft Teams and stuff like that. So like I run all of my meetings on Zoom or Teams or whatever through this. I'll occasionally have to move some audio and whatnot a millisecond here and there. What causes those millisecond hiccups and how do you keep those things synchronized?
Well, what do you mean by
if I run things, if NDI gets involved in all, then it's like, oh shoot, I've added some latency. Or if I add a bunch of filters, I'm sure that I'm adding some millisecond or two as an audio filter or a video filter does something. And I've always wondered, how do you keep my mouth synced up with the audio?
It's really difficult. That goes down to the subsystem pretty much. It all comes down to the timestamp of each audio segment and each video frame. So if you have like a video frame, it has like a specific timestamp associated. If you have an audio frame or a set of audio frames, you have a timestamp associated with that. And then basically the audio subsystem, they have to sync it up to like they have to use those numbers, and they have to the audio has to be inserted like at a specific frame to be able to make sure that it matches up. The video is like, it operates from the assumption that the video is always correct and that the audio needs to adjust based upon the audio timestamp. So the audio timestamp will see, what the video is currently at, and it will basically automatically adjust the audio segment, and it will put it into the circular buffer, place it into the circular buffer at the specific point. It's not actually like placing it at the end of a circular buffer. It places it like at a specific point. It's really complicated, but it's basically just timestamps.
Interesting. So when you flow things in and out of Windows or any system, do the timestamps come along? Is this metadata that's plugged in? I didn't realize that I was creating timestamps.
Yeah. If anything that you have that's being input into OBS usually has a timestamp associated with it, whether it be video or audio. Like for example, if you add like an audio source, let's say you go into audio settings and you say you want to capture desktop audio, that desktop audio will come in with a timestamp associated with it, each audio segment.
And that is at a high enough resolution, that timestamp, like they don't have different flavors of timestamps. They have enough resolution in the audio that you can make frame level decisions on them.
Well, I mean, there are some sources that have like different types of, or different forms of timestamp. Like, for example, the desktop audio is captured in 100 nanosecond timestamps, and the OBS itself operates at nanosecond. And so you have to adjust that to nanosecond, and things like that. And other sources may operate on some other value, and you have to convert that to nanosecond before you use it, things like that.
Hey friends, you know how I love great podcasts, and I want you to check out the Code Newbie podcast. It's all about stories from folks on their coding journey. They talk to new developers, experienced developers, and everyone in between about how they got started learning to code, how they navigate their technical careers, and they also do deep dives into technical topics in a newbie-friendly way. Check out their podcast at www.codenewbie, that's NEWBIE.org/podcast. That's codenewbie.org/podcast. When you started this, you said it was Windows only, and then you went cross-platform. How nightmarish was that? How many?
Very nightmarish. Oh my God!
You went from calling Win32 directly to deciding which shared objects you needed to call on Linux and what was the associated.
Yeah, I did it pretty much for fun, and because I just wanted to get more developers involved in the project, because there are a whole bunch of Linux developers out there who are just so talented, that I've come to see, and even Mac developers, although Mac has been kind of on the low side in terms of support, but that's another story. But yeah, it's been a nightmare. I'd say that Mac has been like the most troublesome operating system to work with, because pretty much if you're writing a native application for Mac OS specifically, Apple will basically deprecate things and you won't be able to use them anymore. And they deprecate things so fast and so aggressively. And in comparison to like, say, Microsoft, who will let things fly for like 20 years, Apple will like kill things off after like 2 or 3 years if they really want to, and they just have no like discretion about it. It's like, okay, we're doing this now, everybody's gonna have to get used to it, and it's like, everybody's like in unison, like,
that's like so painful to hear, because at my day job I work at Microsoft, and I'm like, VisiCalc runs on Windows still, because if we removed it, someone would email, I don't know, Bill Gates or Satya and say, you broke VisiCalc. All right, I'll put that API back. But like Mac, I have a Mac Mini, and like one day it just stopped getting support. It's like, it's dead. It's on Snow Leopard.
Yeah, it's
They don't care.
yeah. I'm not going to say they don't care. They're just very aggressive. Yeah,
They
very
care differently.
aggressive. And the next thing that we have to deal with is there's two new things that we have to deal with. They're deprecating OpenGL, which basically kills our entire graphics subsystem, and then they're going to switch to ARM. Which is yeah, I got a dev kit for that, but yeah, that's not going to be fun.
I was going to say, when you said earlier that I switched, you said I went to cross-platform for fun. That's a strange idea of fun. And then I think I'll go to ARM for fun. This will be fun. This will be great. This is fine.
Well, it's interesting because I've never really programmed on ARM before. I've always been an x86 programmer. So it's going to be an interesting new experience, even if it is a pain. There is like, pain is like another side of a coin, or one side of the coin and the other side is pleasure. So, it's like, yeah, you could look at it that way.
What is that thing about pain is weakness leaving the body? I don't know if that applies to ARM ports, but I'll be very excited to talk to you in a couple of years or months whenever you get it moving onto ARM.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we'll be able to get it pretty soon. I'm pretty sure that I could probably just that the only real problem is just converting our intrinsics and any assembly stuff, but that's pretty much it. There isn't too much of that, so I feel like it shouldn't be too much of a problem.
So it feels like the last 3 or 4 months, as we opened, we talked about kind of how the world has changed. OBS was doing great. I mean, with the rise of game streaming, with the Twitches and the mixers and the whatnots of the world, OBS was doing well. And then out of nowhere, COVID happened, and I went from being an OBS user to being an OBS Studio teacher, and now I'm constantly, every day, setting up another new person with it. Did you have any idea that this would become the powerhouse that it is for video conferencing and remote workers?
I did not, and it's kind of blows my mind. When I first wrote the program, people had been asking me to write like a virtual camera, and I was like, no, I don't want to work with direct show anymore. Because I already wrote like the direct show input, where you can take input from devices. It's how you capture like your webcams and stuff like that on Windows. And direct show is a serious pain. I've had to do way too much programming in direct show, and it's just extremely unpleasant. So I've always avoided it. I've said somebody else can do it, and eventually somebody else did. Another contributor wrote his own plugin for it. It ended up being really popular, and now it's like incredibly popular. And so me and the guys, the other guys on the project, the core guys on the project, decided, we've really got to have this integrated in the project. And I was just like, okay. And I ended up having to write it. And, I took the code and I like tried to adapt it, and things like that. So yeah, we're going to have a virtual camera next version. So integrated directly into the program. So you won't have to necessarily download like a third-party plugin just to be able to use it as in your conferencing software. But yeah, it was a bit unexpected, especially with how many users started using it after COVID. It just blew my mind. Like we've had like 3 times the amount of users that we've had before. It's just like so many users per day. It's just astounding.
How do you know that do you have a kind of telemetry, or how do you know that the public is suddenly burst? Did you see the download numbers and you go, oh my goodness, or do you see the questions in the forums?
We have an auto updater in the program that pings our server whenever the program starts up. So we basically get a ping. And that's pretty much it. All what we got whenever the program starts up. So we have a pretty good idea of how many people are using the program per day.
Wow. And then it just kind of like over the course of a couple of months, it kind of effectively went viral.
Yeah, it's skyrocketed. It was just crazy. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah. I wrote an article about how to set up the virtual cam and then how to set up the NDI tools. Do you have a relationship with that company or how that works? Because they're not open source. They're a whole thing.
Oh, you mean the people? You mean New Tech is one.
New Tech, pardon me. New Tech and makes NDI tools.
Yeah. I've definitely communicated with them a few times. it's kind of hard. We don't distribute it with our program because they're a proprietary tool, and
right.
Yeah, so I don't want to take responsibility for distributing any sort of anything that requires dependence upon proprietary software like that. So I've been just kind of keeping hands off. Now there is a plugin that somebody wrote to make NDI work, but I'm just, in terms of like license compatibility, it's kind of in a gray area.
Right.
So I just kind of keep hands off on that one. I really wish that I could have NDI directly integrated into the program. I'm just a little bit hesitant at the moment until like I can get like a firm go ahead from like a legal counsel or something like that.
Right. I know that like Skype for desktop has like they redistribute that NDI tx.dll, and that's kind of where it all happens, and it is kind of a gray area. But what I'm hearing you say is that in the next version, is that version 26 of OBS, you'll have that virtual cam built in, and that's going to be basically make it so you download it and it works right out of the box for folks that have that webcam need.
Yeah. Just to be more specific, it's the virtual camera is basically as it sounds. It's you're able to use OBS as a camera with another program. So you can select. So when you select your webcam in like any other program, you'll be able to go, like Microsoft Teams, for example. You can go down and you'll see OBS camera, and you can just select it, and it'll just automatically get the OBS output for you.
Mm-hmm. And speaking as a user, for folks that may not have played with this before, what's great about this is I have now 3 webcams, including one that points at my desk. So if I'm doing hardware demonstrations or I want to point down to my soldering iron, I can just push a little button and switch my scene, and then I'm suddenly looking at another source, but I didn't have to change anything in the app. So Zoom, Teams, Skype, whatever it is that you're doing, you get this lovely transition. And once you've started doing transitions in scenes, you're going to be hooked.
Yeah.
And you'll be an OBS user for life.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and it's very customizable. Yeah, there's a whole different bunch of transitions you can choose from, and it's just got a whole bunch of fancy little features and things like that, and so many awesome features like that are contributed by the other contributors, and it's wonderful. I love the program, and I love the community.
One of the plugins that I think has amazed me the most, just for you to like hear from a user what we appreciate about the community, is a WebSocket server, because I can't leave the house and my producer can't leave the house. So I set up a Stream Deck so I can push a button. A Stream Deck is just a little big old pile of buttons, and I can push them. And I said, I really wish someone else could push these buttons, because if I'm interviewing someone, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So he goes to a website, and we're both on the same subnet, and he now has virtual buttons, and he's in Seattle and I'm in Portland, and I can record a whole show, and he'll hit buttons on his side, changing scenes in OBS, and it's completely changed our production workflow, because we really don't have to do any more editing.
Yeah, like I said, it just goes back like to the beginning of our conversation, like people just making these wonderful add-ons and things like that. It's funny. The Stream Deck is another one I was going to mention. It's crazy that companies are making hardware that basically integrates with the software and controls it. It's like, it just blows my mind that, that there's like this ecosystem around my program. I just never would have thought that this sort of thing would have ever happened. It's not just like the open source community, but it's like companies and things like that. And it just blows my mind. And speaking of the WebSocket and the NDI plugins, those are made by a wonderful contributor called Palakis. I just wanted to shout him out because he is absolutely a wonderful person, a wonderful developer, and those plugins are pretty much the top plugins for the project.
That is really very thoughtful for you to do that. Palakis, of course, is Stéphane Lepine from France, an active member of the community all over the forums, always being helpful and helping to move things forward. It's interesting, there's lots of plugins, but there is also a long tail of plugins, right? There's the top kind of 5 or 6 essentials. Mm-hmm. And then there's all this other diverse bunch of plugins to choose from. I'm curious how you feel about the ecosystem in that you've got profit companies, New Tech, Stream Deck, building on top of this thing, but you haven't chosen to kind of cash in on OBS. You have a Patreon, you have an open collective, people can support you and your community, but you didn't take a giant check.
Well, when it comes to open source software, it's complicated. It's like, I want to take that giant check. I would love to take that giant check. I'd be like,
I would love to give you a giant check.
Yes, give me the money. But if they do it and it's within the guidelines, within the license guidelines, then, it's within the clear pretty much. So if somebody makes an awesome plugin, or if a company makes an awesome tool for the program, and if they're making profit off of it, then in my humble opinion, more power to them. I would love for them to, I would love for all those companies, to become sponsors of the project, because, they're definitely benefiting off of the program's development. But we're not necessarily forcing anybody. We do get big sponsors, as we have Twitch and Facebook as 2 big sponsors right now. Hopefully more in the future. And, we're always looking for more sponsors. We would absolutely love to have them, and we would love to be able to have more developers or full-time developers on the project. I plan to hire 1 extra full-time developer on the project relatively soon. I'm waiting for him to get out of college. But I would definitely love to have more people who are able to do it full-time and be able to dedicate, or at least dedicate more of their time to the project. And so we're always looking for that. And I understand that things are complicated, and I'm not going to hold it against anybody, if they don't, necessarily sponsor. But we would definitely it would be highly encouraged, because if anybody's making a profit off of the program existing, then hopefully they can mutually give back, and hopefully we can continue to repeat that cycle, so we can help them to continue having more success. If we have success, then we can help them to have more success. So it's definitely mutually beneficial for everybody involved to do that.
Yeah. And I really want, for the folks that are listening as we get towards the end of our podcast here, if you have used OBS, if your organization is using it, if you're spending time in it every day, if it has become an indispensable part of your workflow, I would encourage you to go to opencollective.com/OBS project and just scroll down to the part that says contributors. And you'll see the big ones. You'll see the Logitechs and the front-end masters and the XSplits that are giving, tens of thousands of dollars. But I also want to point you out to folks that are giving a couple $100, because they are individual users and humans that have had their lives changed. I see a contribution from someone who gave $1,000 because your team is allowing them to live stream events, or their church or their local community center live streaming things, and they didn't know it was possible, and they didn't have to pay. So they are paying, but they're paying you and your team and supporting your software. So I do want to tell you that I appreciated you coming on the show, and I hope that everyone who listens, who either uses OBS, gives you some money at your Open Collective, and folks who've just heard about it now on this show, you get involved in this just wonderful community.
Or a Patreon, or we also have PayPal. We have.
You take direct PayPal. I like that.
Yeah,
there you
PayPal,
go.
And or if you're a really big sponsor, we can work something else out. That's what we usually try to do, so we can avoid any unnecessary fees and things like that.
That's a really great point. So I'm going to put links to the Patreon, the Open Collective, and the PayPal all in the show notes. And I would encourage you to get the word out. Thank you so much, Hugh Bailey, for chatting with me today.
Sure. Thank you so much.
This has been another episode of Hansel Minutes, and we'll see you again next week.